Ismail, I think we can start, huh?
Okay. From east to west, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the third session of the ILO Masterclass series. I was just saying to Carl and to Stefan from UNIDO that I am very excited today because of having two of my favorite institutions to work together, ILO as well as UNIDO. I would like to say hi to Brian and to Stefan as well. Welcome. As well as to IDA of Ireland, to Leo Clancy. We are going to have three excellent sessions today, and I would like to thank you all to this third session of Masterclass series. Thank you very much for your participation. I also heard that today is the holidays for Brazil. We were thinking whether there's anyone who's sacrificing their holidays to join us. I'm happy to see somebody from Brazil, and special thanks and special salutations to them as well. Before we start, I would like to do some little reminders. You are already used to it, used to Masterclass series. What we do, we just mute our microphones and we utilize the Zoom chat box function at the right bottom of your screen. And we all know that this session is being recorded and is going to be available at eCampus. However, we always suggest you to join us, to interact, and to be with us online. Carl?
Yes, thank you, Ismail, and also on behalf of ILO and the training center of the ILO, thank you for joining us once again, and especially a special mention for those joining from Asia. Huh? Again, we cannot forget they are now, while we watch a little bit of television in the evening, they're now actually watching a webinar session with us. Huh? So thanks, because I see I see some people from, amongst others, Sri Lanka, India, being here with us. So thanks for the effort of being here with us. Let's have a quick look on the agenda for today, where we follow the same sequence of activities as in the previous master classes. We will have a look on what were the discussions that are ongoing regarding Masterclass 2 and Masterclass 1 before we give the floor to our special guests coming from UNIDO and Ireland. Today's session, we will focus on business linkages, digitization, and aftercare. So for the colleagues from UNIDO and Leo from IDA, thanks a lot for being here with us. And then I think in around 70 minutes, we will go into the discussion questions that are linked to Masterclass 3. And we finish, as always, with the invitation for Masterclass 4. We still have participants joining us. Now we really had to say stop. I think we enrolled earlier this week the final participants, I believe from Namibia, if I'm correct, that joined us today. I think they're also catching up on the recordings of the webinars that are online, and I can see I have to remind you these webinars are available, and I'm also seeing that they are being watched, so very good for that. But for those that just joined us, this is already the third masterclass out of a series of 5. We're now more or less in the middle of our series of master classes. We have still 2 more lined up after this one, next week, Wednesday, and Wednesday in 2 weeks, where as you know, the 5th master class will be your master class, Ismail, isn't it?
Yes, of course. As you know, you all know, we put very high importance on experience sharing. And the 5th masterclass is going to be the right location to do that. And we are going to listen from you, from your experiences. We already have 2 available seats. We would like to thank to those who already submitted their candidacies to take part at the 5th session. And we are still looking forward to have 2 more IPAs, and we are looking forward to listen from your experiences on the topics that you see on screen about digitalization, aftercare, linkages programs, and SME development, investor retention programs, mainstreaming and advancing sustainable development, IPAs and alliances and partnerships, and other topics that you may wish to share with us. We are ready to listen from you, And at the 5th masterclass, we would like to listen from you and exchange your experiences with other peers. I think that's going to be very important and funny one, let's say. Right, Carl?
Exactly, Ismail. Yes, we already have 2 or 3 good proposals that we accepted. So especially if you look on mainstreaming and advancing sustainable development, maybe you came up with an innovative incentive scheme that was favoring, that was built around the SDGs. Please let us know. Also special partnerships or collaborations. You remember the one that we saw last week from Invest Chile was an interesting experience. Do let us know, and who knows, you will be yourself in the masterclass within 2 weeks. So thank you also everybody for adding to the discussion forums. As I said, without you, this would be a very poor experience. It's thanks to you that your contributions to the discussion forums that we can really say that it has been a success so far. So keep on sharing. We are going through all the discussion forums, and I hope for everybody it is as interesting as it is for me going through all the posts that have been done. So keep on doing that. And also I would like to take a few minutes now I picked a few of the discussion, the posts that you posted out that I would like to share with you. I'm also happy to see people are still working on the introduction forum and the masterclass 1, so which is perfectly fine. If you still want to respond to some of the questions that are linked to masterclass 1, that is fine. And there was one that I picked up yesterday that I thought was very interesting, and that was still linked to masterclass 1, and I'm not sure if Clifford is online. And if Clifford is online, can you put on your video? Hi, Clifford. Yes, I see you there.
Hello, sorry.
It's fine. Hey, Clifford. I saw you were active on the forum yesterday, and you had this interesting post on how the crisis also creates opportunities, new markets, new actors, and I liked your post. Can you elaborate a bit on it, what you posted on the forum?
No, thank you. You look at how the industries have been compelled to look for solutions closer to their geographies and look at innovation. For instance, everyone now has been forced to adopt the technology. You have no choice. You have to know your Zoom, your WhatsApp, your WebEx, and others. And you need someone to walk you through that and, for instance, tell you the right product and provide you that back-end support. I'll give you an instance. Some of these things have breakaway rooms, and some of these companies do not have that capacity or competence internally. So you're finding that the youth is suddenly finding itself being invited into the table to say, hey, I've seen you play on TikTok. Can you tell me how this thing works, or can you manage it for me at least for the hour that I'll be running? I'd meet people, open breakaway rooms. And I think this is where it's coming together. And the good news is you don't need an access ramp into a building anymore. So the building doesn't have to be disabled friendly. Even a disabled person sitting at home and their desk can now provide that service without having to deal with the usual face-to-face rigmaroles and challenges. And that's where my thought sort of was leading me.
Good, thank you, Clifford. I also mentioned, I also see that you mentioned rolling out data access, access to internet. That's correct, huh?
Yes. And I'm very happy. 2 days ago, I had to show up in the office for asset verification. So I saw that the city has rolled out, for us, it's still 500 megabits limit per day, where you just, as soon as you are near a government building, you're able to just access that network and use it. And I know, for instance, that Joburg and Swan have rolled this out even to neighborhoods, including to some townships. So, of course, the purpose at the time was to create access to job opportunities. But in this time, you can see how then that can be leveraged by SMMEs in some corner garage. Ironically, that's where we were a couple of decades ago, to actually participate in the economy actively and provide these services.
Exactly. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Clifford, for this. Coming from South Africa, I believe. Welcome.
Yes, Gauteng, Johannesburg. Thank you. Thank you
Gauteng.
very much, Carl.
Thank you, Clifford. I also was looking then into discussion forum too, the very active team Botswana from the special economic zone. Do we have somebody from Botswana with us?
Hi, Carl. It's Geraldine.
Hi, Geraldine. So you were saying you are operating a special economic zone in Botswana, highlighting job creation. Can you elaborate a little bit more how you do that?
Okay. I think it's important as an IPA to contribute to the vision of the country. Already, Botswana subscribes to the ILO labor law standards and decent work. And as an IPA, we found it fit that when we evaluate projects, the component of employment creation carries more weight, so that we value projects that are going to contribute more to employment more than anything. And then for operational companies, the incentive that we give to companies is the 200% training levy. This is meant to upskill the people who are already working and then also contribute to the quality of the labor workforce.
Thank you. So really emphasizing jobs, job quality, incentivizing companies to invest in skills of your employees, of your Botswana employees. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Geraldine. Also, a lot of the posts on discussion forum too, and it's already interesting because we will be talking about that, was on the topic of linkages, SME linkages, competitiveness, and SME business linkages. And I picked two of them. We can of course discuss both of them. We had Annabelle and Filippo, and both highlighted the work their IPA were doing on linking businesses. Maybe Filippo, are you with us? I saw Filippo earlier, or Annabelle. Okay, no, yes, I see Annabelle from Nueva León, but maybe there's a problem with the connection or with the linkages.
Yes. Sorry, Carl, Filippo speaking.
Hi, Filippo, welcome. You're, I think, the most close by from all to me. You're in Tuscany, huh?
Yeah, I'm in Florence at the moment.
Exactly. Welcome, Filippo. Can you elaborate a bit more on your post in the discussion forum?
Well, we try to create linkages between local suppliers and the multinational enterprises already located in Tuscany through the organization of events. So matchmaking events, starting from the technological challenges that the multinationals located in Tuscany have, and we try to help them solve these problems, identifying potential suppliers in Tuscany, mainly in Tuscany. But we also included sometimes companies from other regions of Italy if we don't have a specific competence, a specific capability in Tuscany. Therefore, we included other companies from other places. And so, we also tried to launch a more elaborated program that is called Open Innovation Club. In this respect, we tried to create a sort of platform in order to facilitate open innovation projects between local enterprises and multinational enterprises. And we also supported them in trying to be funded by the EU on the Horizon 2020 program. We had good results, but I think that probably there's a missing link, and the missing link is that we have also to work on local suppliers in order to strengthen their capability, because sometimes the dialogue between a local supplier and a multinational is a difficult dialogue. I mean, they have a different level of management, different procedures, they follow different approaches. Therefore, and I quoted the experience, for example, of Singapore, maybe a sort of preparation program for local supplier before starting the conversation with multinational enterprises could be useful.
Thank you, Filippo. That's a recurrent theme, huh?
Yeah.
And maybe also the challenge in the matchmaking, because that's also why I highlighted Annabelle's post, huh? That she as an IPA, they are working with the SMEs to make sure that this collaboration, that they are up to the expectations from the multinational enterprise. This might even be exactly, yeah. It might be on how we do that, the design of such a linkages program. I see Jerry it might be good for IPA, for Masterclass 5, if somebody has specific experiences on what are the kind of services that an IPA could provide to SMEs to ensure this competitiveness of SMEs. Let's maybe go to the final one, because I also like this one, this post by Maria Gabriela. Maria Gabriela Santiago, she's online. I don't know if she can maybe put on the camera or your audio, it's fine. Can you explain this, my first job, and what you as an IPA are doing in channeling an M&E to participate in this program, which is basically focused on youth employment? Maria.
Hello, good morning, everyone from Ecuador. It's the morning here. Hi, Carl. I tried to start the video, but it says that the host has stopped it. So, but
it's fine. We see the picture and we can hear you. So
okay, it's okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So, in our IPA, which is located in Ecuador, we always invite our current and our potential investors to sign an investment contract with our state. Through this contract, investors are waived certain tributes and tariffs as long as, for instance, they commit to generating job positions throughout the country. We don't want investment projects to focus only in our main and biggest cities. So that's why when projects are located outside these two main cities, which would be Guayaquil and Quito, the investments are better and these incentives last even longer.
Thank you.
So, yeah, so these projects must generate a minimum quantity of jobs, which is determined by the income and the size of the company who implements it. Through the project description, we also learn what training programs will be provided by companies. And after an investment contract is signed, our IPA conducts periodic monitoring to ensure companies are fulfilling their commitments. These are some of the examples. There are other initiatives we promote, but let's keep it short because
it's fine. As long as it's on the topic, there is no limitation. Hey, thank you very much. I think this is a very interesting example because you are an IPA, and you are basically working with investors on how they can contribute to job creation at the national level. So thanks a lot for that, Maria Gabriela. Okay. Again, I invite all of you to share these experiences online. And as said, I hope everybody is once in a while peeking on the discussion forum. And don't hesitate also to contact each other bilaterally. That's also the idea. This is also a bit of matchmaking between the different IPAs that we are doing here through the discussion forum. So let's continue with the main feature of today, and I would like now to call to the virtual floor our colleagues Stefan and Brian from Unido. Stefan, I see Stefan, you're on my left at least, and Brian, I think you're below me. Thanks a lot for joining us once again, this time virtually, and be a partner of this course. And I would say, Stefan and Brian, please go ahead and you can introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Carl, for the nice words of introduction. Thank you also, Ismail from WIPA, for hosting us in this session. We are very excited to seeing so many IPAs from all over the world and have a bit of time to share our experience in doing technical cooperation with a quite wide group of IPAs. So, and we hope that this initial presentation would then also dovetail into an interesting lively debate, question and answers in the second part of this session. So just a few words about myself. I'm Stefan Kratsch. I'm Industrial Development Officer, and I work for 15 years at UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. And I have to say, since the beginning of my career, I was working on investment and partially also on technology promotion, and it's still a topic that where one can reveal so many interesting dynamics, so interesting new trends that it's exciting every day to be working in this field. I also pass quickly the floor to Brian Portelli from UNIDO and then also to Leo briefly.
Brian, I think
Brian, you're
okay.
on mute. We can't hear you. Brian. Hello. Brian, we actually can't hear you.
Yes, Brian is on mute.
Yeah, I've tried to unmute him, but
Maybe let's proceed with Leo. Leo, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? My name is Leo Clancy. I'm a member of the Executive Committee at IDA Ireland, which is Ireland's investment promotion agency for foreign direct investment. I lead the technology, consumer, and business services sectors, which are 3 of our 7 identified business sectors. I also look after corporate IT, so I have some insight around the digitization agenda. I've been at IDA for 7 years. I came from a background of 17 years in the telecommunications industry previously, and I've worked around the world with Ericsson first and then with an Irish optical fiber promoter. So I hope that was clear, Carl, and that you heard me okay.
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Better than Brian. Maybe Brian, can you try again? Or if not, I hand over back to Stefan, and then Stefan can also share his screen.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, loud and clear.
Very good.
Hi,
Thank you
Brian.
very much. Sorry, that was, as usual, technical hitches. This transition to a digital world is not without mistakes. So, yeah, everybody, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Brian Portelli. I'm currently Chief Technical Advisor with UNIDO. I've been working with UNIDO on investment technology promotion for the past 10 years. As was mentioned earlier, I think it's always a very humbling and exciting experience to be able to engage with a number of representatives from IPAs. We all work in the same field on different fronts, on different ends, but these are very important occasions whereby we can exchange experiences and also learn from each other's practices in the country. So very much looking forward to today's session. Thank you.
Stefan. Okay, good.
Unmute. Okay, I hope everyone can see the screen. Yeah, unless anybody says that that's not the case, then I'll proceed with the presentation.
we can see it clearly. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you again. We're very happy to kick off the technical content on this masterclass session 3. in discussions with ITC ILO and also WIPA, we chose a topic that we feel is now very high on the agenda, given the new aspects of investment promotion that were significantly changed by COVID-19. And we chose the topic strengthening FDI SME business linkages. We heard a bit of that also already from the colleague from Tuscany. And then as part of that, we also look at FDI aftercare. So we will take about 45 minutes or so for the presentation. So I will do the first part, and then Brian will actually do the second part, where we focus on two examples that we feel are very strategic pillars on any aftercare services that an IPA would like to provide to its constituents. So we first start with an introduction to remind about the topic and how aftercare kind of integrates itself into the investment promotion cycle. This will be very fast because there are most of you are IPAs, so we don't have to teach things that you already know and probably know better than we do, as you practice it every day. The second chapter would look at a bit of an approach, the way we see it in terms of doing a stepwise engagement of investor groups through aftercare. So it has to do with prioritizing, especially which investor groups should be in the segment of investor development or key account management, and which investor groups could be reached out through more broader based information sharing through websites and so on. And then we look at the two examples which also link into our technical cooperation as UNIDO, and this is on FDI local linkages support, as well as the example 2, which is looking at investment promotion, but somewhat specifically geared towards expansion investments, which also then, as opposed to new investment arrivals, would also thematically be quite akin to what an IPA would do on aftercare. And then we provide a bit of the global context, and then we will conclude and hand over to Leo to then elucidate how it's being done from a practical point of view. So let me briefly start with the introduction. As I mentioned, I will not dwell too much on it. There is the investment promotion cycle is very well known to all of you. I think it was already mentioned that at the beginning of this cycle, there should be a clear routing or a clear anchoring of any investment promotion efforts by an IPA into a larger policy strategy. This could be an industrial policy, or it could be a national level SDG plan in how to reach the 2030 SDG goals. And that should inform how specific investor groups should be engaged, how a specific type of impact should be fostered through facilitation services and others. Then that dovetails into doing some concrete project development work, perhaps doing some value chain analysis work to present this to potential greenfield investors, but also investors looking at mergers and acquisition. Then that would dovetail into investment targeting. And then basically things get quite concrete on investment facilitation as this stage then enters in the decision-making process and the facilitation and licenses and approval process. And then after that, when the investor has started implementation, then kicks in that wide area of investor aftercare, whose prime objective would be to trigger reinvestments as the opposite of the investor repatriating earnings back to the parent company, or even worse, reshoring back to the country of origin. And as a last point that closes this circle, then also inputs into policy making, which could then, in terms of a feedback loop, also inform modification to the industrial policy or the SDG strategy or other development plans that may exist at the country level. So in the following, we will basically focus primarily on that green box, the reinvestment and the investment retention logic of the investment promotion effort. So the relevance of aftercare, this has also been repeatedly flagged in various studies. There was an important study that UNCTAD has published in 2007 as part of its investment advisory services. Most of the IPAs would be familiar. It's a quite comprehensive document looking at aftercare. We also have recent WAFTEC studies, including a session that WAFTEC has organized at the end of April to specifically look at aftercare and the new relevance of that in the light of COVID-19. And then not to forget also the important evidence that WIPA has repeatedly presented in conferences, in studies, in reports, relentlessly flagging the need for IPAs to do more aftercare. The main rationale, as mentioned before, is that a good aftercare project can tap into reinvested earnings from existing investors in the country. And the figures are ranging between about 50 to 70% of all global FDI flows. So if one looks at the UNCTAD projections of $1 trillion USD FDI flows, which is down from 1.4 trillion FDI flows, still the aspect of reinvested earning would account for about 500 billion USD, which, as probably no one can deny, is a very significant amount. And as we talk about an unprecedented global crisis, one could even assume that the shares on how reinvestments are channeled will even further increase to possibly as close as 100%, given the fact that new greenfield investments, unless they have already advanced in the establishment process, will very likely be postponed or, in the worst case, also being cancelled. And another factor, of course, is that IPAs have major difficulties to reach out to potential investors and generate leads through face-to-face investment promotion efforts. And the investment promotion is a face-to-face business primarily, I would think, or we would think, but digital media and digital efforts need to offset that within a very short time, and for sure this creates a lot of challenges for IPAs. So despite what seems to be a common consensus that aftercare is crucial, we find a very striking mismatch if one looks at the IPA budgetary allocation. We would call this even a paradox. The first one we are presenting in this course. What we could see is that about 10 to 20% of IPA budget is allocated on average on investment aftercare. It's a bit higher for IPAs in the OECD, as UNCTAD recently reported. There it is about 30% of the budget and about 30% of the IPS personnel. Now, in the case of COVID-19, it's even estimated that almost everything or the entire budget is geared towards aftercare. But the main challenge remains if the people who have been previously assigned to other functions in the IPA can immediately convert it to become very good aftercare officers and in dealing or basically on a day-to-day basis with existing investors. So the budget allocation is quite low, 10 to 20%. But as I mentioned, between 50 and 70% of all annual investments are reinvested earnings. So what that would seems immediately a striking imbalance between a US dollar invested in IPA budget and the potential multiplier effects that can ensue from that in terms of new investments promoted. Another point we want to make to support the narrative on why aftercare is important comes from our own work that we have done in sub-Saharan Africa and also in Vietnam. And here we asked investors already operating in the respective regions, meaning they have made a commitment to invest in those countries, to tell us what do they think new incoming investors, who would they contact first to learn about the feasibility of investing and doing business in a country. And again, very strikingly, almost 50% or around 45% indicated that a new investor would actually, as a first contact point, go and inquire from an existing investors on how it is to do business in a country. Even before reaching out to an IPA or to reach out to the network of overseas embassies and so on, which also leads to a quite simple conclusion, which is to, by nurturing the existing investor communities, they can, through word of mouth and through networking with potentially new investors, actually be very effective advocates for the IPA itself in amplifying a positive message on investment attraction into a new location. So the third point is already pointing a bit towards the next chapter that's going to come, is to see how IPAs really, how much do they really know about existing investors? And we have to say that from our work, which is a bit biased, let's say, on IPAs in developing countries and especially sub-Saharan Africa, we find that quite repeated pattern in the sense that investor information is mostly collected at the point of registration, but not then consistently thereafter. And what this means is that we often seem to find a mismatch between the announcement of the investments and the actual implementation of those investments, if one then goes and checks what actually can be found on the ground. And for instance, in Vietnam, we found that it was just about 50% of what was initially announced would be invested. So this is a bit of a sobering news, but it is important to understand that things are changing according to the lifetime and dynamism of the investors project. There are some other examples from South Korea, Singapore, China, and so on, which also point to the same finding, namely that the implemented investments are usually a lot lower than what is being announced. And it seems there's a rationale for investors to do so, because sometimes this is linked, of course, to reputation, to gaining legitimation in the country, having the goodwill of the IPA and the policy makers, etc. Sometimes it's even linked to a financial benefit or fiscal relief in terms of incentives and so on. So it seems it's rational for an investor to be very upbeat and very bullish about what the investment would bring to a country and how much jobs it would create and so on. So we seem to have a second paradox, which is that IPAs only seem to have a regular dialogue with at best 50% of their existing investors, which was recently confirmed also by a study that World Bank and UNCTAD have done World Bank and WIPA in 2020. But despite that being so, it's very clear that every existing investor can become an advocate or not, depending on how things are going, for a new prospective investor to follow and come in and invest. A last point we want to make is, if we look at the different stages of the life cycle of an investment, and this follows a bit the cycle that I presented in the first slide, we see overall that the need and the relevance assigned by the investors on aftercare is more or less matching with the same importance ranking that an investor would put on the decision making or the entry stage. So it's the point we're trying to make is that the perceived importance of IPA assistance at the aftercare stage is barely any different to the importance of investment lending services prior to when these investments are happening. And we just again present an example which was from investors in 20 sub-Saharan Africa, which we ask about giving us the importance along those different stages in the cycle. So that brings me to the next chapter, which is what can be done or where to start. So we want to make this, or in our presentation, want to make this quite straightforward, although of course things are a lot more complicated in real life. But as simple as it may sound, it would start by establishing or updating the existing investor databases as a starting point. That should then, through some analytical efforts by the IPA, lead to some prioritization on groups of existing investors that should be engaged through different modalities of engagement. And that again would then frame the resource and the human or the HR allocation in who within the IPA aftercare department would look at which group or which sector or at which region where such priority investors are being located. So coming back again a bit on the data on existing investors. So here again, from our own work, we try to develop a bit of an taxonomy of some sort around three major blocks. So the first thing is to define basic investor characteristics, how large they are, what's their main motivation, do they come for natural resources, markets, efficiency seeking, are they mixed domestic foreign owned or are they wholly foreign owned, where do they come from, are they perhaps even attached to some a diaspora or returning nationals or more foreign entrepreneurial investment. So these kind of things to define who that animal is in terms of the investor. Then one would look at some performance measures following a simple logic that an investor who is performing well at the moment is also more prone to reinvest. So looking to some extent at growth figures, capacity utilization, maybe even capital productivity or profits, if that's something they would be willing to report, can inform, of course, who could be strong advocates in your aftercare engagement process. And then probably the most interesting set of indicators looks at the impact indicators. It was already mentioned employment. So an IPA should know which investors contribute how much to employment in terms of jobs being created. But of course, not only that, but also the type of jobs that are being created. And if these jobs actually enable creativity of people to do things they like, if also these jobs are aspired to give in jobs to women as much as men and these kind of things. So having such information would then create a good basis to generate some business intelligence about what could be priority investor groups. And here, these are just some graphs. It would take too long to elaborate on this, but just to give an example, we looked, for instance, at expected reinvestments over the next 3 years. So we asked this to investors, again in a survey that we did in sub-Saharan Africa. And we were able to then categorize that by different subsectors. So that would immediately show which subsectors have a propensity to reinvest. Now at this stage, that investment hasn't happened, but it is a very important pointer for an IPA to then seize that opportunity and reach out to companies that constitute that particular subsector. So questions to be asked in that analytical process would be, what existing investor segments plan to reinvest and how much? In as far are such reinvestments linked to an intention to create more job opportunities? What do these specific groups think about the investment climate and what improvements they would like to see in the investment climate? And to make all this happen, what are the priority services that a specific group of investor would want to see from an IPA? And then we are in the third segment, where one has to rationalize as an IPA, which doesn't have unlimited human as well as financial resources. One has to prioritize how to reach out to these investors from an aftercare logic. And here, a possible segmentation could be to look as one dimension at the expected positive impact in the future, or looking at the inverse is to say what foregone impact would happen if those investors would reshore or would divest in the times of a crisis. And then also indications from that the IPA has about how willing the investors and how interested these investors are to engage in a more in-depth dialogue with the IPA. And looking at these quadrants, one could see that some investors in the low quadrant could be catered by giving them mostly online references, rather unspecific support via websites and newsletters. So case in point are specific website informing about COVID-19 related measures and subsidies, regulatory changes and so on, reaching out to a large group. The other segment would look at investors that are very interested to work with an IPA, but perhaps their expected positive impact is still positive, but maybe not as positive as some other investors. So here one could look at engaging with groups of investors through webinars or through other forms of outreach to them as a group. And then we're looking at the high positive impact segment and those that are, well, a bit skeptical about engaging with an IPA. So here the IPA would have to invest in going the extra mile and seeing how it can focus on some quick wins to gain the trust. So maybe to really sort out a very operational issue such an investor might have with customs or dispute resolution and so on. And that could then win the trust to move some investors into the quadrant which is most interesting. And this is the quadrant where you have a few investors, but those would need individualized aftercare support. So there shouldn't be too many investors in that quadrant because it's very resource and budget intensive, and that has to be, of course, well aligned with available resources. So the Pareto principle could apply in the sense that that could be the law of the few. So a few investors can really make a big impact eventually on the economy. The aftercare support items, I will maybe not dwell too much on them. We would classify them according to administrative support items, which looks at renewal of permits primarily and introduction to some service providers. Then there are the more operational type aftercare support items, which look at site support in finding sites, general troubleshooting, maybe some grievance relief mechanisms through ombudsman functions and so on. And then there is the strategic segment where one talks about things like upgrading value addition in the country, or helping a strategic reinvestment to happen. Or also in that segment, we would talk about things like local supplier development and how MNEs could assist them actively in them complying to their own standards, but also eventually international standards. So if we then overlay as an additional layer into the 4 quadrants, it would seem that the administrative support would mostly focus on the larger group of the low segment, where things should look at, or where the IPA should add operational support. That would be in the middle part, where things are gradually shifting towards the high quadrant. And then support on all 3 aspects, administrative, operational, and strategic, should be consistently followed up for investors that would find themselves in the upper right-hand quadrant. Now, soon I will hand over to Brian. We will not, in this session, could lend itself for a full week training on aftercare, but in this session, we just want to pick out 2 examples, which we see mostly subsumed under the strategic service functions of aftercare. And this has to do with identifying local suppliers and assist in them complying to international standards as one example. And then as a second example, to help TNCs build a business case to present to the parent firm new investments into the host regions. And ideally in doing so, also warming up TNCs to the idea of not doing such an investment alone as a wholly foreign-owned operation, but to assess options of doing it with a local partner through a strategic alliance or a joint venture. So at this stage, I'm handing over to Brian, who can then take us a bit more closely through these 2 examples. So I stop sharing my screen. Over to you, Brian.
Thank you, Stefan. Just to check again that you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, Brian.
Thank you. Yes, so we'll share my screen. So yeah, coming back to the third part, so focusing on the FDI local linkage, we wanted to share some observations about our work in this area and how we think it can be an important element in terms of the overall aftercare service function. Then we will make the argument about the essential aspects of investment promotion within this context of aftercare and how it links, of course, with the domestic enterprises. So yeah, I mean, it is very clear that we had this interesting introduction with a colleague from Tuscany explaining what are sort of concrete interventions that could support and help the closer linkage between foreign and domestic enterprises in any economic jurisdiction. Obviously, we all know that there exist several market failures, which obviously make it not so automatic and not so immediately realizable that there would be links between the foreign and the domestic enterprises. But on the other hand, if we want to continue talking about sort of key paradoxes, it's obviously clear to everybody especially to IPA representatives, that the so-called spillover effects from foreign direct investment to the local economy, to local enterprises, are not realized. They are a huge potential for the economy, but these are not realized due to low and very weak links with the local economic operators, be it local suppliers, be it also other institutions and operators in the economy. Why is this? There is an ongoing debate, of course, but ultimately it all boils down to lack of information, lack of transparent information, we like to call it, in terms of what local suppliers can do and who are they and where they are located, because most of the time there is also a lack of understanding of what is the local capacity of local SMEs, local enterprises, and what they can supply, at what level of the technology frontier they can participate in these globalized value chains. And obviously this lack of transparent information is also triggering also a certain lack of awareness from local suppliers about what are the opportunities in their own economy at the level of downstream market opportunities, at the level of sector linkages. So in a nutshell, yes, there is a certain lack and an ability of local suppliers to partake in these global value chains because they cannot supply at the quality and the quantity required by larger buyers. So again, the point we made in the introduction is very much to the point, in the sense that yes, there has to be a dialogue. This dialogue has to be facilitated between the domestic and the foreign companies, but such dialogue cannot be taken for granted, because most often than not, these are enterprises working and operating at different levels, also even at the level of the respective capability perspectives. Unfortunately, the last point is also very much real. We also feel and understand that the governments often take a very myopic stance on terms of enforcement, or even in this setting and establishing local content requirements. Of course, here we do not want to enter into the debate of the pros and cons of having local content requirements, but it is undeniable that more often than not, these local content requirements are introduced in the economy without too much of reference to the empirical evidence on the ground, in the sense that very much government would very much lack a clear understanding, and it goes back to the information, a clear understanding of who are the suppliers, in which sectors they would be operating, where they are located, and what type of capacities they have. So time and time again, there are these local content requirements which would be copy and paste regulations from more successful economic jurisdictions to be applied in the host country, without too much reference to exactly who are the suppliers and who are the buyers, and how the two can come together, how the two can be this link can be facilitated. In this aspect, yes, we have, as UNIDO, been implementing a long-standing program, a long flagship program called Subcontracting Partnership Exchange, which basically exists specifically to matchmake buyers and suppliers, and to make sure that at any within economic context, there is a clear understanding of what could be realistic and feasible goals in terms of local content measures. So very quickly, overall program objectives. Basically, UNIDO works with member states, with developing countries, whereby contracting partnership exchange centers are established in existing organizations. Like, for example, we have a number of investment promotion agencies, primarily in Sub-Saharan Africa, which host these SPX centers, the case of Kenya, the case of Mozambique, for example. And then there are, of course, strong partnerships with the private sector, with public-private agencies, like in the case of Cameroon, whereby we also support in this matchmaking intervention. So the overall objectives basically refer to the fact that, yes, there needs to be a strengthening of the ability of domestic enterprises to really be able to participate in these global value chains, to participate to capture as much as possible these emerging opportunities for subcontracting. It is important also to support enterprises through the need to understand exactly what needs to be done in terms of upgrading of respective productive capacities, as well as try to understand from a first point of view of what needs to be done. So that's why we speak about performance assessments. I mean, time and time again, the immediate constraint and challenge for matchmaking is exactly that there are certain expectations of delivery of product, of service, which obviously with the current resources, with the current technology, with current operations of SMEs, that SMEs might have at one point in time, that matchmaking might not be possible. So that's a market failure. So something maybe can be done to try to bring the two operators closer together. Ultimately, the objective of this program, of the SPX program, is to increase local content of foreign investment in the country, but also time and time again, it's clear that there is a lot of investment happening in developing countries in the form of major investment projects, which can and offer important opportunities for subcontracting, linking to the capacities and capabilities of domestic enterprises. In a nutshell, the approach, basically, we like to refer to 4 pillars. Basically, the first pillar is the information build-up in terms of profiling and buyer engagement. Here, what basically we mean is the information from a point of view of exactly who are the suppliers and who are the buyers. So, from a profiling of enterprises point of view, we have a methodology basically that we can support SPX staff and experts to really understand and do the required profiling and research about who are the domestic companies, what they produce, what type of technologies they have, so that a database would be developed in the process. At the same time, there is a need for immediate engagement with who could be potential buyers in that economic scenario. So not only building up a database of suppliers, but also try to identify those buyers that can play a role in and have as part of the strategy the resolve to increase local content in the host economy. So in this aspect, it's very important to understand what type of also timing factors would be involved in terms of what type of prospects for projects over time requiring certain input, certain services that could be sourced and subcontracted to local and domestic enterprises. An important aspect is the second pillar there, which is the benchmarking. This refers exactly to the assessment of the supplier business performance. And this is a very important, let's say, set of yardsticks if you want to try to assess how prepared these suppliers, how prepared these SMEs would be to immediately involve themselves in contractual obligations with potential buyers, potential foreign buyers. And of course, this assessment is highlighting also time and time again the need for investment upgrading, the need for certain performance improvements within these business entities, which would need immediate action if those companies, of course, want to take the next step in terms of establishing these forward linkages with the foreign buyers. Which leads, of course, to an extensive supplier development process whereby we work alongside institutions in the country which are providing specific support and services along these lines to facilitate enterprise development support, to make sure that these buyer-supplier development initiatives are realized and become important for the development process of the country. So here it is clear that once there's this assessment of a certain need for upgrading, which requires investment, that's where things become interesting, because this becomes an important call for an investment promotion agency, for example, to try to, with one stone, hit two birds, as we say, in one instance, helping and supporting domestic enterprises upgrade, whilst trying to attract inward foreign investment, perhaps, to establish potential joint ventures between domestic and foreign enterprises. Of course, this is also a very important exercise and triggering the potential technology transfer and the mobilization of technology and knowledge between foreign and domestic enterprises. Last but not least, this dovetails into the importance of networking for investment promotion, whereby most of these opportunities could also become very important investment opportunities that can be promoted to potential investors by the IPA and other investment promotion stakeholders in the country. I mean, in a nutshell, the normative goal is basically to position an SPX center at the very center of any system at the country level, whereby let's say, prevailing inefficient, ineffective, high duplication, poor communication, lack of transparency, and all the transaction costs associated with this in this game between the matchmaking between buyers and suppliers. And of course, here we're also looking into aspects of, for example, state-owned enterprises opening up public procurement to domestic enterprises, to a situation where there is a certain linearity and a certain understanding of what can be achieved from a matchmaking, facilitated matchmaking platform point of view. As I said, the profiling methodology looks into the, let's say, the identifier, the identikit of the domestic enterprises. So here, a lot of information is collected. I mean, this is basically the cornerstone of the program, whereby databases are built to highlight the essential element, essential information about the company, as well as the capacities of the company. So here, it's not only about who is who, but what type of technology standards, what type of financial situation of companies, what type of also prospects in terms of feasibilities of projects that they might have available. So if there are SMEs which already have plans for upgrading for investment with readily available feasibility plans for project proposals, then of course this is a very important, let's say, a reference to potential buyers, for example, whereby it is reflecting a certain level of understanding of what needs to be changed, and there could be matchmaking could also be a link towards more closer supplier development between buyers and suppliers. Okay, I promise this was not sound coming from me, from my office. But yes, so from a benchmarking tool, it's also a data hungry and intensive exercise, which tries to collect data variables on various aspects of the let's say the operations, the performance, as well as the competitiveness, we would say, of domestic enterprises, based on aspects focusing on financial situation of the company, in the business development, the type of processing, what is in terms of learning and growth of human capital within the organization. So here, using the balanced scorecard approach, the exercise, let's say, leads to a very rich overview of where the company, where the supplier stands, and what type of next steps would be recommended for upgrading purposes. I mentioned the buyer engagement. Of course, this is again, it's also very important from a point of view of trying to understand what is the demand analysis from the buyer. So which specific goods and services would the foreign investor try to seek and source locally? From a supplier assessment, it's also quite important to understand which demand is there as suitable for local supply capacity. So is there matching there? Is there alignment? And what needs to be done also from a policy perspective at the level of policy environment to promote these linkages, because we have very clear experience from implementing the program in various countries, whereby it is of course very different to operate in a country whereby it is mandatory for local suppliers to be linked with foreign enterprises, basically, because it's also mandated by laws and regulations, in comparison to a situation where there's a bit of a more freer market perspective. Of course, now within the unprecedented times that we are living, things are very fast changing in terms of the type of policies, the type of local content requirement, the type of requirements on the existing investors. So all these discussions about buyer engagement and demand supply gap analysis become more, let's say, more important at the policy level agenda. Just wanted to share some quick examples from real cases of, let's say, ongoing SPX offices. This is one case in Cameroon. I understand there are also colleagues from South Africa. UNIDO and the government of South Africa had a very successful SPX program in the past, which has evolved into a more technology intensive promotion program. So same in Kenya, same in other countries. So basically, in this particular case of Cameroon, the point of departure was very clear: many large infrastructure projects. And of course, there was an understanding and feel that there would be something that could be done to bring these projects mostly implemented also through consortia involving also foreign operators and foreign business, how they could link with the local economic sector. So the objective was essentially to provide a permanent matchmaking platform for buyers to source from local subcontractors. So this led to the establishment of the Bourse de sous-traitance in Cameroon. Of course, a very successful program, because it has also received a certain level of attention from the policymakers to make sure that there is a sustainable and favorable regulatory and also operational context in which this type of intervention can successfully be implemented. So yeah, it's a bit dated, but basically this was an assessment that was done a couple of years back, whereby try to understand a little bit what was the essential impact on the ground. So local subcontractors, it's not only about profiling them, but it's not only about benchmarking them, but actually getting them to be matchmaked with buyers. So more than 230 matchmakings have been undertaken and recorded, resulting into 100 contracts successfully signed. So here we have an environment whereby the large companies have as part of their modus operandi, so to speak, to try to link as much as possible to try to concretize their local content strategies through a facilitated program, through a NIDO supported SPX intervention. Of course, this is not just because it's going to benefit the domestic companies or the foreign companies, but this is actually creating jobs, mobilizing investment, and of course, creating that crowding in effect that is very important for developing economies. Which leads me to the second point about the investment promotion for project expansions. Here, as was amply referred to in the first part of the session, the domestic enterprises they can bring together the links with the international players, with the multinational enterprises. But what is most important is to try to understand if there could be, through these linkages, through the attention on domestic enterprises, whether there could be the provision of certain potential joint venture projects between domestic and foreign that could be promoted by the IPA. So in this sense, there could be a role for, let's say, tapping new forms of investment type of opportunities, which can, on the one hand, link with the strategic goal of expansion from the existing investors, but at the same time to support the overall upgrading of domestic enterprises. UNIDO has quite an extensive technical assistance portfolio of projects in the past and ongoing in terms of supporting investment promotion for joint ventures. And yes, we want to basically put together a bit of explain a bit what used to be done before COVID and what we are actually doing now because of COVID, and of course these are the ways and means how we are supporting the local enterprises and the local institutions. So we have been involved in projects which sought to support investment promotion agencies, investment promotion institutions, to also do an extensive investment profiling work to try to understand what opportunities exist at the sector, also at the enterprise level. We worked in Colombia and in Ethiopia. These are some of the many examples. But basically, we also try to link this type of work with an extensive technical assistance support from a point of feasibility analysis and assessment of projects through the COMFAR program, which is another flagship program of UNIDO. Basically, this links together in the sense that one identifies the project opportunities from the sectors as well as enterprises, and there is a concerted effort to support the feasibility analysis and assessment of these projects, which then, of course, become quite important propositions for potential investors. But basically, all this used to dovetail into one thing, which basically means face-to-face interactions. Of course, what do we do now with face-to-face interactions not being possible? So what we're trying to do as more recently is to step up the digital solutions aspect for investment promotion. There was a point made at the very beginning that sort of we are all facing some sort of a forced digitization. So I want to believe that all the IPAs can attest to this point, that whether we like it or not, investment promotion has to change or has to embrace this aspect of embracing digital solutions. So Essentially, yes, we tried our best to basically bring forth three aspects. Identify the project opportunities, because ultimately, as much as we like digitalization and all the IT tools, at the end, at the cornerstone, at the heart of all these tools, basically remain the work of identifying, promoting, facilitating, and formulating these project opportunities. So, and this is work that can never change, because this basically is very much linked and closely linked to the economic, the social fabric of the host economy. So we do a lot of work on the identification side and the formulation of investment opportunities at enterprise level mainly. This basically means doing investment project profiling, utilizing IT tools and methodologies, as well, and more importantly, to provide advisory support to investment promotion agencies in this process. As a second point, yes, I mean, all this information, all these investment opportunities have to be promoted. So we have been developing tools which dovetail into an online investment promotion portal, which serves as a repository, which would serve as a repository of investment opportunities to showcase these opportunities at the country level. So in a way, this is a bit like adding or providing an additional platform to a very fragmented interventions at the country levels, at the IPA levels, whereby maybe similar interventions or similar promotional channels are being developed or have been used in the recent past. What we are trying to do here is basically to consolidate efforts at the country level. Last but not least, of course, it's not enough to basically identify the projects and promote them and put them on a portal. Then there has to be a lot of legwork, maybe also virtually, in terms of mobilizing investor interest, because ultimately we are also on the lookout to basically be very, very concrete in mobilizing investment interest, to sensitize about these opportunities, but also to give also an extra push to the IPAs in terms of lead generation, in terms of generating queries about what they have to offer to potential investors. From a point of view of identification, yes, I mean, I don't dwell too much on this, but we are developing digital solutions for this, basically to create what we call investment opportunity profiles, which would serve as a sort of a backup of information on specific project opportunities, be it greenfield projects, be it brownfield or joint venture opportunities. But this basically would involve a strong role for verification of data, etc., from which investment teasers could be developed and then published on an external investment platform. So very, very quickly, what I'm sharing on screen is basically what is currently being developed for a particular collection of projects that UNIDO is currently engaged in. So basically, we will have a web-based tools, basically web presence for countries to be able to showcase investment opportunities in the different sectors, but also to make sure that there is a very strong contact point between who is sponsoring a project, who is promoting a project, who could take also the initial inquiries and follow up on these initial inquiries. So from this point of view, this is also a, let's say, a concrete intervention to support the current efforts of IPAs in still needing to undertake investment promotion, but of course they are forced to succumb to certain challenges in terms of maneuverability, mobility, receiving or visiting countries in the respective jurisdiction. So from a point of view of yes, investment mobilization, it's not only about the identification of projects, but what we are also trying to do in terms of various interventions that we have, especially the important program that we are currently implementing with the European Union, is also to, and this resonates back to the point raised very much earlier in our presentation, is that we need to work closely with those representative organizations of existing investors in the country, because they are the best ambassadors and the best partners to IPAs in sensitizing our investment in the country, but also to try to link to other let's say actors in the investment mobilization field, like the development financial institutions, like local development banks, and so on and so forth. So the last the last basically reference is, again, I just mentioned it, is reference to an investment promotion program that we are currently undertaking. It's an intra-ICP action funded by the European Union, but the essential aspect here is that we are trying to implement these elements of digitizing as much as possible these investment opportunities at the country level, and of course trying to provide a lot of advice support to countries to basically link to what are the investment plan frameworks out there. I mean, in this particular case, this is a very concrete action within the framework of the EU external investment plan, whereby we try to support the initiatives of the intervention country IPAs in mobilizing investments to their countries in terms of greenfield, but also in terms of the joint ventures. So from the point of view, yes, I would come to the main conclusion. I think Stefan also would also like to share some of his interventions here. The idea of the FDI backward linkage support is important, because it is a very concrete way how the two, let's say, elements we can bring them together. But of course, we are aware that there are certain certain challenges, certain constraints which need to be facilitated. But also there is an opportunity to extend the aftercare service support to make it more concrete to existing investors, but also to domestic enterprises.
Thank you, Brian. I see already Carl appearing on the screen. I think he wants to send us a message. So we will be very quick on, I think, on the conclusion. Yeah, we were able to showcase the relevance of aftercare from a global perspective, and that no investor group should be in principle excluded from aftercare support, but that strategic investor development services such as backward linkage support through an SPX program or similar programs, as well as support to develop expansion projects, require, of course, significant resource allocations of IPAs, and also require subject expertise and potentially also sector expertise wherever these investments would happen. So if there are a lot of new investments in Industry 4.0 or digital platform companies, etc., it would seem important for IPAs to also import that qualification and skill as part of their current pool of employees. So without further ado, I hope Carl agrees. I would like to hand over to Leo, who can now round it off in giving us the view of the practitioner. Please, Leo.
Thanks, Stefan, and thanks obviously to Carl, Ismail, and the team. Can everyone see my presentation, or Carl, can you comment to see my presentation in screen mode?
We can see your presentation clearly, thank you.
Thank you. So delighted to be here. I'm conscious of time. I'm going to move through these slides relatively quickly. I've introduced myself earlier. As I said, delighted to be here and speak to you all. I think to talk about IDA first as an agency, a number of you may know us. I've highlighted the part of our mission that's most relevant here. We partner with multinational companies. That's part of our mission. We also, to the mission of the ILO, provide jobs and economic impact for the people of Ireland. So those are the two core parts. And I think that partnership theme is extremely important for what we do. I'm not going to dwell on this. Our aim, obviously, and we can take the debate later, is to be the best investment promotion and development agency in the world. I'd love to get some feedback on how close we might be or how far away, but we'll take that for questions afterwards, maybe. Just looking at the impact on the society and the economy of Ireland, we have over 1,500 companies to cover. That gives us a lot to do. As you saw on the previous slide, we have about 300 staff, including in Ireland, and about 70 of those are overseas. So we've got a lot of companies to cover, a lot of potential market to cover, and I'll come back to how we do the aftercare in some detail. Employment in Ireland in FDI companies was 245,096 last December. That is about 12% of Irish employment, give or take. And we estimate that there's about another 150 to 200,000, depending on cycles of investment, employed in the rest of the economy. So for direct investment, very important for us. And I should make a note that IDA only does foreign direct investment, or in Stefan's terminology, transnational companies. So we're exclusively focused on that. We have a sister agency, Enterprise Ireland, which assists Irish firms and SMEs with exporting, and they have a very separate mission, but we do work as sister agencies, but with a clear gap between what our missions are. So I think that's good. With you know, Geraldine from Botswana, I think earlier I noticed you mentioned it's all about jobs, and we think that too. You know, jobs are our key metric, but we also, as you can see on the right hand side, look at other metrics like the amount of capital investment that our clients make, and also increasingly the quality of the jobs. We measure the salaries. We measure the number of jobs approved in our base with salaries over 35,000. So these are increasingly the quality metrics we look to for investment. Coming to aftercare, which is the key topic for today, you know, this is absolutely key. And as you mentioned earlier, 50 to 70% seems to be the metric. Stefan, I've included your paradox one as a summary here. It seems to be the metric for IPAs. We're no different. About 70+ % of the investment into Ireland, I'd estimate, comes from existing investors. And you can see some of the examples down here. There's about 3,500 jobs represented by these announcements by MasterCard, Amazon, HubSpot, Regeneron, and Gilead Sciences just in 2020. These are only some of the new investments. They're all from long-established companies. I think all of these companies have multi-year investments. The newest one is probably Regeneron, and I would say that was 2014 probably. Others have had longer-standing investments. So aftercare is super important. You can see on the top right how we represent our client engagement cycle. So we start with awareness, which is trying to find a client that does or doesn't know about Ireland and raise their awareness, all the way through the investment journey, through helping them through the implementation and working with them in aftercare. What's not so obvious but lines up with the UNIDO presentation is that cycle starts again. So after people have implemented successfully, and once we're in aftercare, we cycle back again and we start again with awareness raising, because companies never stay the same. Their missions change, their leaders change, there are new things and new functions to win. If you win manufacturing, could you win R&D next year? If you win services, could you win some manufacturing? So there's always something new to win. So I think that's the key point, very aligned. I'm just reaffirming, I think, what's already been said. But effective aftercare is hugely important to us. Having a system for it, which I'll talk about on the next slide, is very important. And, you know, the key thing, the key factor is strategic relationship building. You know, you're really, I saw my boss interview today in FDI Intelligence, and his headline statement is that FDI is a contact sport. And I think that's absolutely the way we think about things. It's about relationships with people. Last point to make is that effective aftercare doesn't require just effort from the IPA, but buy-in from other stakeholders. And that includes government primarily. We need to make sure that they're on our side, but also the rest of industry and society. And I suppose no surprise to anyone, it's that structured aftercare means satisfied clients. So you can see paradox number 2, as presented by UNIDO, is that IPAs have a regular dialogue with at best 50% of their existing investors, and that every existing investor can become an advocate. So we like to think we speak to our clients more than 50% of our clients every year, and I'll come to that in a minute. But if I stick with the advocates for a second, you'll see on the bottom left press clipping of our 40-year celebration of Apple's presence in Ireland from January 2020. And there's a still of the address given by Tim Cook, which for those who can't see it says that Apple could not be more grateful for your partnership and your leadership. And that's in the context of their investment in Ireland. So in terms of advocacy, which the UNIDO colleagues mentioned, it doesn't get much better than the CEO of the second most valuable company in the world on a platform hosted by the IPA saying that they value our relationship and partnership. So I think that was a pinnacle for me, because Apple is one of my key clients of performance, but really important to us that we get those messages out at all levels. In terms of the detail of how we do things, you know, in our structure, every investor company, no matter how small, has 2 named individuals as their contact point. So all 1,500 companies know that there are 2 names. So first name is someone in Ireland, and the second name is someone overseas. And no matter how infrequent the contact, those people are named as responsible for the investment. We tend to break it up between sectors first, and then within sectors, we have senior staff who oversee a territory. And territory in this context, for instance, could be the US Midwest. So the person is responsible in my team, for instance, for technology, consumer and business services in the US Midwest. They have a small number and really small number of strategic clients, 3 to 5 typically, that they look after directly. And then they have a small team, 2 or 3 people who look after between 10 and 30 investors each. So that's the core of how we interact. Those people are portfolio responsible, they're named against it, and they're held to account for the performance of those investments. We have a large number of smaller clients, people who you class SMEs on a global basis, that don't fit into those standard sectors. And in that case, we've created a dedicated cross-sectoral team of just 5 people, each of whom have about 50 clients. And again, they will talk to those clients at least once a year, but probably more frequently and hopefully more frequently. So I think the key message here is no client is left behind. The other key point here is that we operate a customer relationship management system, a CRM platform that allows us to maintain contacts, meetings, queries, opportunities. This is the gold dust of an FDI agency, in my view, the relationships you have with clients and the way that you maintain it. Then next, we have an organizational level committee made up of some of our executive and management team members who review each portfolio every year in each department. And that sounds laborious, but it happens over a number of months, where each department manager comes and presents their segmentation, and they submit on an every client in the portfolio basis an assessment of opportunity and risk. And that's the structure basically for how we manage, but it's a very high touch model. Even for small clients, we try to make sure that we have contact at least a couple of times a year with all our clients. If you look at data, which was another point that Stefan made in his presentation about where you start, we have a couple of data sources. We agree data is of critical importance. So we run an annual employment survey, or rather our parent government department of enterprise runs an annual employment survey that shows employment sector, location and type. It allows us to trend the employment among our investor companies. And then we publish those tables, as you can see on the right-hand side. Also, every year we run an annual business survey of economic impact of clients above a certain minimal threshold of economic impact, and that shows sales, exports, payroll, purchases, and costs. It runs a year in arrears to allow for finalization of accounts, but that gives us rich data like the number of exports, the spend in the Irish economy, spend on research and development, investment in capital projects, and things like that. And then last but not least, every 2 years we run a client survey where we look at the sentiment about IDA, the sentiment about Ireland among our clients, and we do that at different tiers. So with some of our large strategic customers, our clients, we will do face-to-face interviews in depth on topical issues. With a lot of the others, we'll do web-based surveys where people can reply, and we anonymize the results largely by sector so that people can be absolutely honest. All in all, this rich data is really important to us as an agency in prioritizing our efforts. It's absolutely valuable in interactions with stakeholders, particularly government. It allows us from a PR point of view for the sector to be able to say precisely what the impact is, and it gives us a leg in to have a conversation with government and give them material that helps underpin the investment in our agency and in our client base. So in terms of supplier identification, we probably have a little less to say on this, and we certainly don't have as sophisticated a model as SPX or some of the others. I think the first thing to say on that is Ireland's a small country with an open, transparent business ecosystem, and we're super well understood around the world. So landing into Ireland, particularly for a US firm, feels very familiar. Lots of people have experience. There's lots of managers who understand how to create linkages. So actually, not that we can take a back seat, but I think the job is much easier than for some colleagues on the line. So it's probably slightly different in terms of what we do. As I mentioned, our sister agency, Enterprise Ireland, has core responsibility for building an export base. They do it relatively independently of us, but we do have a couple of touch points. I would say they probably don't directly leverage our investments in Ireland, except for the couple of points I'm going to come to. They tend to have their own teams out in the world speaking to buyers at a global level, and then sometimes it's incidental that there will be an Irish link. The two things we do is a global sourcing program where we have mutual contacts within the agencies, and at clients' request on either side we can put people in contact, but it's quite informal, I would say, and it's not a huge overhead on either agency. We also run Irish and overseas trade missions, which are like speed dating sessions for buyers and sellers, and again, they're very helpful, but probably most of the activity that happens happens independently by the agencies. And I think that suits us, because one key important point here, I think, for linkages is not to compromise the inward investment by pushing the SME agenda, and vice versa, not to compromise the SMEs and structure and their efforts, or to make them too dependent on the local multinational community. I think there needs to be a healthy separation between those two, although linkages like the guys have described are super valuable if people don't understand the SME landscape. One case which I won't dwell on is the data center industry, which has created a huge export market for Irish companies. The reason it has, in my view, two reasons. Ireland has always had a very strong construction sector at the local level, and that stood to us very strongly. And we also won, from an FDI perspective, all three of the three cloud players. So Microsoft, Amazon, and Google all invested in Ireland in their first cloud data centers in Europe during the early noughties. They've built on that, and they procured the initial activities from local suppliers, and the local suppliers have grown with them. So you can see the comment from our construction industry chairman that 24% of the EU's data center, by his estimate, is in Ireland. Irish firms have a couple of billion, we estimate about 2 billion of exports in the data center space, not including the market that they have in Ireland from data center build. I think the key message for colleagues on the line here is data center was a sweet spot for us. It was an area where we had an early edge in the market. And I think those are the easiest ones to create SME volume and impact. You know, if you can look at the 80-20 rule, which are the areas that you're already strong? Where do you have strong SMEs? Where do you have strong multinational presence? And I think those are the sweet spots to spend your time on to build the linkages, and you can really build scale if you take that approach. So I've gone through that quickly, just conscious of, I just want to spend a couple of minutes on our COVID-19 response and what it meant for aftercare. Again, I'm not going to go through each of these bullets, but you can see that we've refocused our organization. You can see that I'm still working from home. We refocused our organization around 3 points: engaging with our clients, working with colleagues across government, and supporting our health service in all their efforts. That was our 3-pillar plan for the COVID period, at least for the first quarter. Really important that we did the tactical things in collaboration with our clients. In some cases, we were helping clients source laptops and do other tactical stuff. Important as well that we understood at a granular client level through those individual contacts, which were the companies that were affected by which aspects of the lockdown, so that as things change at a government level, we could contact them proactively and help them understand how to navigate it. At a strategic level, we set up a dedicated policy response unit just to service client queries. So we removed some of our people from their day-to-day jobs and put them in a dedicated team. We actually did a further survey to the three I mentioned earlier of client impact assessment from COVID. We consolidated that. That was really useful for us in directing our efforts towards individual clients and sectoral needs. Also useful to share with government to help them understand what affected our sector. And again, you're always making the case for what your sector needs, and the sharper your data is, absolutely the better it will be. And then I think the last piece, and I'll finish on this slide, is what does engaging remotely mean for us? I think like everyone else, we have had to engage remotely. That's problematic, I'll have to say, because our normal activity is a contact sport. If you take it, we have site visits to Ireland for people to finalize their investment decisions. Those cannot happen now. They're typically 2 to 5 days with a senior delegation in the country. We have marketing visits where I will be in the States or somewhere in Europe or Asia, meeting with clients on the ground. That can't happen now. And mutually, they will come in and visit their operations. And then we have events, conferences. That's a rich vein for us of meeting people and networking. Again, that's gone. So I think some of the advantages and disadvantages, I think conferences are really difficult. It's very difficult to get that one-to-one cup of coffee experience at this kind of conference. There's ways that are evolving, but it's not clear yet. I think in terms of reaching out to our clients, the advantage is that we can meet a senior member of the client at any time we need to now, rather than waiting for an in-person visit. That's brilliant and more focused on the agenda. The advantage from site visits perspective is we have started to show people Ireland and showcase Ireland through Zoom. That works really well also, because you can have someone visit a location at one end of the country now, and in an hour's time they can be at the other end, where that might have taken us 2 or 3 days, or we couldn't have accommodated it in an in-person visit. So those are really good. For both of those though, the problem is you lose personal touch and that in-person relationship. It's very hard to replicate over a video format, and for investment decisions, very hard to close things, particularly a new name investor. I think you saw my examples earlier of Amazon, Regeneron, and others who continue to invest because they know Ireland and they have a base of thousands of people. Much harder to close out a new investor, and that remains a problem. And I think until we have a more open global travel situation, it will remain a problem. So that was it. I took as little time as I could, just conscious of time, Carl. So with that, I might hand over to you and let us know how you want to use the remaining time. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time, and happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Leo. Also, thank you very much, Stefan and Brian. I was actually keeping an eye on the chat box, and it was very vivid, very much alive. I think Stefan and Brian will have a lot of work to do given all the SPX assistance requests that are popping in. I also see a lot of questions coming in on SMEs and linkages, and how to transform a threat, something which is perceived as a threat, as an opportunity. Let me quickly, because now I see a lot of insights coming. I would propose, given also that it's that we would like to finish within the next 10 minutes, if you have any specific questions that you would like to ask, please post them on the discussion forum, which is linked to the masterclass, because I think that would be the easiest way to continue the discussion, which already very much is ongoing. Let me go back to, let me quickly share my screen, 1 minute. Exactly, this is, okay. Can you see my screen? Yes, okay. Okay, let me have a look already at and also start with finishing this masterclass by looking at some of the guiding questions that, of course, are flowing out of the interventions that we got from Brian, Leo, and Stefan. Specifically looking at this this local linkages support which is available at your country level. What are the kind of partnerships that you have established at the country level between, for example, the chambers of commerce and business associations, and also the efforts on joint venture investment opportunities at the country level. I would propose that pick one or two of these questions coming from this list and keep posting them on the forum, which is linked to the Masterclass 3. And as indicated before, please also, if you have any question that you feel has not been responded in the chat box, you can always repost it again in the discussion forum. Ismail.
Here I am.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, first of all, to Stefan, to Brian, and to Leo for the excellent presentations. Actually, I took amazing notes. I almost finished my notebook, actually. Therefore, I would like to thank them again. And for the very comprehensive presentations that they shared with us regarding aftercare, regarding willingness of investor to engage with IPAs, which I find very, very important as well, which is going to be one of the topics that we are going to work on during next week's sessions. We are going to have ICC with us. We are going to ask them actually where IPAs are providing good services, but where are we lacking as well, where IPAs are lacking. We are going to listen directly from the investors. This is going to be the chance for us. Andreas Dresdner and GIZ are going to be with us as well. They are going to tell us more about international collaboration on Wednesday, 16th of September. I think this is going to be, of course, this one's, all the masterclasses were perfect. We hope to reach out to the nirvana of masterclasses next week with the participation of investors who are, of course, the customers of IPAs. We are going to listen from them. We are going to learn from them, which I think is, of course, crucial, as important as exchange of experiences, for which we already invited you to take part at the 5th masterclass. Please raise your candidacies to take part at the 5th masterclass. We still have 2 available seats. Please contact Carl or Patricia or myself to exchange your experiences with us. We would like to thank you again for participating to this masterclass. And I'm always counting the participants in the beginning and in the end. And thankfully, this is never changing. We start with 112, we end with 112, 113. So this is, of course, another happiness for us. And we see that energy is there and the interaction is there, experience sharing is there. We would like to continue for it with the 4th masterclass next Wednesday at 3 o'clock. And look forward to meeting you again.
Thank you, Ismail. And once again, thank you, Stefan, Brian, and Leo for the contributions. And we see each other on the online discussion forum and next week's masterclass. Have a nice rest of the week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, everybody. Real
Thank
pleasure.
you, Stefan. Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. Good afternoon. Bye.